3 miles. That's all the distance separating two Russian-built Su-30 fighter jets from the USS Gerald R. Ford, the most expensive warship ever constructed. At this range, a single missile launch takes 4 seconds to impact. 4 seconds between routine naval operations and an international crisis that could reshape the Western Hemisphere. The Venezuelan pilots know it, the American pilots know it. And in the Combat Information Center of the $13 billion carrier, every officer is calculating the same terrible equation. If those Su-30s suddenly go weapons hot, can we stop them before they get a shot off? It's 10:12 a.m. on October 28, 2025, and nobody is breathing normally. The radar operator's voice cuts through the tension. Contact maneuvering. They're flanking. One high, one low. This isn't a friendly pass, this is attack geometry. The high fighter threatens long-range engagement, while the low one exploits radar shadows, splitting defensive attention exactly as Russian doctrine prescribes for killing aircraft carriers. On deck, sailors crane their necks skyward, watching contrails paint deadly arcs against Caribbean blue. In the cockpit of Viper 3, an American pilot's gloved finger hovers millimeters from the trigger of an IM-120 missile. One radio call could authorize weapons release. One wrong move by either side detonates a powder keg that's been building for hours. Because this confrontation didn't start at 10:12. It started in darkness at 6:47 a.m. when an unidentified aircraft appeared on radar moving fast at low altitude, no transponder, no radio response, no identification. Then came the ghost contacts, the surface probes, the coordinated multi-domain pressure designed to test, to probe, to find weaknesses in America's most powerful weapons platform. What unfolded over those hours represents something far more significant than a close encounter. It's a masterclass in modern deterrence theory, a case study in aerial combat at the knife's edge, and a stark warning about how dramatically the balance of power has shifted in waters America once controlled without question. The Caribbean isn't quiet anymore. And what happened when that $13 billion fortress met Russia's most lethal fighter export changes everything we thought we knew about naval dominance in the 21st century. Let me be clear about what we're examining here. The Gerald R. Ford isn't just another aircraft carrier. At $13 billion, it represents the most sophisticated naval weapons platform ever constructed. Its deployment to waters within striking distance of Venezuela's coastline wasn't coincidental. It was a deliberate signal of American strategic intent in a region that connects 3 critical choke points: the Gulf of Mexico, the Panama Canal, and the oil shipping routes of northern South America. Whoever controls these waters controls hemispheric trade, energy security, and power projection capabilities throughout Latin America. The Ford's presence declared American determination to maintain that control. Venezuela's response would test whether that determination could withstand sophisticated military pressure. From a tactical perspective, the carrier group's composition reveals the Pentagon's operational priorities. The Ford itself carries approximately 75 aircraft, FA-18E and F Super Hornets providing air superiority and strike capability, E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes offering airborne early warning and battle management, and MH-60R Seahawks conducting anti-submarine and surface warfare operations. But the real force multiplier lies in the supporting vessels. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with Aegis combat system can simultaneously track and engage multiple aerial and surface threats across a 400-mile radius. Below the surface, Virginia-class attack submarines employ passive sonar arrays to detect and classify subsurface contacts while remaining virtually undetectable themselves. This isn't merely a show of force, it's a networked, multi-domain surveillance and strike system that can dominate battle space across air, surface, and subsurface dimensions simultaneously. The first contact at 6:47 a.m. initiated with military analysts call a graduated response protocol. The unidentified aircraft approaching at low altitude presented multiple assessment challenges. Low altitude flight suggests either reconnaissance intent or attack preparation, both scenarios requiring immediate evaluation.
The decision to launch two F/18s for visual intercept, rather than immediately illuminating the contact with fire control radar, demonstrates sophisticated threat assessment. By maintaining weapons cold status while establishing visual presence, the Ford's command team achieved three objectives simultaneously: gathering intelligence on the contact's capabilities and intentions, demonstrating readiness to respond without triggering escalation, and establishing a precedent for rules of engagement in this specific theater. The visual identification of a small twin-engine aircraft with no insignia raises important questions about asymmetric tactics. Venezuela possesses a mixed fleet of aircraft, including Chinese-built K-8 trainers, Russian Su-30 MK2 fighters, and various transport aircraft. An unmarked twin-engine aircraft conducting low-altitude flight near a U.S. carrier group could serve multiple purposes: testing radar detection thresholds, measuring response times, or even serving as a decoy to distract from other operations. The fact that it maintained silence despite repeated radio challenges suggests operational discipline and pre-planned mission parameters. This wasn't improvisation, it was rehearsed. But the situation escalated significantly at 10:12 a.m. when radar detected two contacts inbound at Mach 0.8, altitude 10,000 feet. The Combat Information Center's assessment as possible Su-30s represents the critical inflection point in this entire encounter. Let me explain why the Su-30 MK2 flanker changes everything about this tactical picture. The Sukhoi Su-30 MK2 represents one of Russia's most capable fourth-generation plus fighter exports. Venezuela acquired at least 24 of these aircraft between 2006 and 2012, specifically to counter U.S. air superiority in the region. The threat matrix is substantial. The Su-30's twin Saturn AL-31F turbofan engines with thrust vectoring nozzles enable post-stall maneuverability that exceeds the F-18's performance envelope. With a maximum speed of Mach 2.0, a combat radius exceeding 900 nautical miles with external fuel tanks, and the ability to carry up to 8 tons of ordnance, the Su-30 can engage targets at ranges and angles that challenge conventional defensive tactics. More concerning from a carrier defense perspective is the Su-30's weapons capacity. The aircraft can deploy R-77 AA-12 Adder medium-range air-to-air missiles with active radar homing and a range of 50 miles. It carries R-73 AA-11 Archer short-range infrared missiles with extreme off-bore sight capability, allowing engagement of targets up to 45 degrees off the aircraft's central line. But the real carrier killer potential lies in its anti-ship missile capability. The KH-31A AS-17 Krypton anti-ship missile, which the Su-30 can carry, travels at Mach 3.5 and employs sea-skimming flight profiles that challenge even Aegis defense systems. At close range, two determined Su-30 pilots with proper training and tactics could potentially penetrate carrier air defenses and inflict mission kill damage. When those two Su-30s executed the flanking maneuver, one high, one low, they weren't simply buzzing the carrier group. They were demonstrating tactical proficiency that mirrors Russian doctrine for attacking naval surface action groups. The high-low split forces defensive systems to divide tracking and engagement resources. The high aircraft threatens long-range missile employment, while the low aircraft exploits radar horizon limitations and sea clutter to complicate detection and tracking. This is textbook anti-carrier tactics, executed at 3 miles range, well within weapons employment parameters.
The vertical climb and inverted roll maneuver observed by the American pilots serves multiple analytical purposes. First, it validates intelligence assessments about Venezuelan pilot proficiency. These aren't simply adequate pilots. They're demonstrating advanced aerobatic capability that requires hundreds of training hours. Second, the thrust vectoring maneuvers showcase the Su-30's performance advantages in specific flight regimes where the F-18 cannot match its maneuverability. Third, and most importantly from a strategic signaling perspective, it communicates resolve. These pilots aren't intimidated by the presence of American fighters or the carrier group's overwhelming firepower. They're confident enough to execute aggressive maneuvers at close range, calculating correctly that American rules of engagement prevent firing first. The American response reveals sophisticated command decision-making under extreme pressure. The order to maintain weapons cold status despite aggressive maneuvering by hostile fighters demonstrates remarkable fire discipline. Consider the tactical reality. F-18 pilots had Su-30s within visual range, executing maneuvers that in a combat scenario would justify immediate engagement. The APG-79 active electronically scanned array radar on the Super Hornet could have achieved radar lock within seconds. AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles could have been fired with high probability of kill. Yet the captain's standing orders, "no one fires first," held despite extreme provocation. This restraint wasn't weakness. It was calculated strategic patience, rooted in understanding the broader implications. Shooting down Venezuelan aircraft, even in self-defense, would have triggered an international crisis that could destabilize the entire Caribbean basin. It would have provided Caracas with exactly the provocation they potentially sought to rally domestic support and international sympathy. It would have forced Washington into a military escalation cycle that neither the Pentagon nor the White House desired. The captain understood that winning this confrontation meant not shooting, not flinching, and not providing the enemy with justification for escalation. But the Su-30 encounter was only one dimension of a multi-layered operation. The subsequent detection of ghost radar returns and the small, fast surface contact reveals sophisticated operational coordination. The timeline is crucial here. The Su-30s engaged American fighters at altitude, dominating attention and sensor resources, while simultaneously a small craft exploited the radar shadow of commercial shipping to approach undetected. The sonar contact detected by the MH-60R Seahawk suggests potential submarine activity as well. This is textbook layered reconnaissance and probing. The visible Su-30 flights serve as the obvious threat, drawing defensive attention upward, while surface and subsurface assets maneuver below to test sensor coverage, reaction times, and defensive priorities. The electronic warfare dimension, creating false radar returns, demonstrates access to either Russian or Chinese electronic warfare technology capable of spoofing American radar systems. This isn't third-world military capability. This is near-peer operational sophistication. The assessment by the Ford's captain, "they're not here to strike, they're watching how we think," captures the essence of this encounter. Venezuela conducted what intelligence analysts call a reconnaissance by force, deliberately provoking defensive reactions to collect data about American tactics, sensor capabilities, decision-making timelines, and rules of engagement. Every radio call, every radar emission, every aircraft movement was likely recorded and will be analyzed extensively. Russian advisors supporting Venezuela's military almost certainly received real-time data from this operation, providing Moscow with invaluable intelligence about current U.S. Navy carrier operations, tactics, and capabilities. From a strategic perspective, this encounter reveals a fundamental shift in Western Hemisphere power dynamics. For decades, American carrier groups operated in the Caribbean with uncontested superiority. No regional power possessed the capability or will to challenge U.S. naval dominance in what Washington has historically considered its sphere of influence. The October 28th encounter demonstrates that this assumption no longer holds. Venezuela, equipped with Russian-supplied fighters and trained by Russian advisors, can contest American naval operations, complicate carrier air wing operations, and collect intelligence on U.S. Navy capabilities at relatively low risk. The broader implications extend beyond this single incident. China and Russia are watching closely, analyzing American responses to provocation in contested waters. If Venezuela can challenge the USS Gerald R. Ford with Su-30s without facing kinetic consequences, what does that suggest about American willingness to engage in aerial combat near adversary coastlines? How does that inform Chinese calculations about Taiwan? How does it shape Russian assessments about NATO naval operations in the Black Sea or Baltic?
The carrier group's decision to maintain presence despite these challenges sends its own message. The Ford didn't withdraw. It didn't alter course significantly. It maintained operations in international waters despite clear demonstration that Venezuela could threaten those operations. This communicates American resolve to maintain freedom of navigation regardless of military pressure. But that message costs something. crew fatigue from sustained high alert status, aircraft maintenance cycles shortened by increased operational tempo, and the psychological strain of operating under constant potential threat. For naval planners, this encounter provides several critical lessons. First, fourth-generation fighter aircraft in the hands of competent pilots remain significant threats to carrier operations, even against the most sophisticated American carriers. The technological advantage of the Ford and its air wing doesn't guarantee uncontested operations. Second, the integration of air, surface, and electronic warfare creates complexity that challenges even advanced battle management systems. The Ford's sensors struggled with relatively simple deception tactics, ghost returns and radar shadows, suggesting vulnerabilities that more sophisticated adversaries could exploit further. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the psychological dimension of modern naval confrontation has shifted. The old calculus where overwhelming American military superiority deterred challenges no longer applies universally. Regional powers with capable weapons systems and trained personnel can contest American operations, collect valuable intelligence, and shape the narrative of confrontation to their advantage. The fact that no shots were fired doesn't mean Venezuela lost this encounter. They achieved their intelligence objectives while demonstrating capability and resolve to domestic and international audiences. The question moving forward isn't whether the Ford's presence constituted effective deterrence. Clearly, Venezuela wasn't deterred from challenging American naval operations. The question is whether American deterrence now requires different calculations, accepting higher levels of provocation, operating under greater threat, and demonstrating resolve through presence rather than through uncontested dominance. The $13 billion carrier remains the most powerful surface combatant in any ocean. But power alone doesn't guarantee control, especially when adversaries possess capable weapons, trained pilots, and the willingness to test American resolve at the edge of engagement rules. That represents a fundamental shift in naval warfare that strategists are only beginning to fully comprehend.